Hey, what's up? No, I'm not doing anything right now, just practicing some of my music. Yeah, so, how's work going? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Natalie, baby, I love you, but we really need to talk about our honeymoon destination. The wedding's only in a couple months now, and seriously, we need to figure out where we're going, babe. Yeah, I mean, I had a couple places on my mind. I heard there's some pretty good skiing opportunities in Hoth, and I heard Kashyyyk this time of year has some really nice weather and some pretty cool trails. I mean, we could hike up some mountains, hang out with some Wookiee. What? Scarif? The name sounds kind of familiar, but what kind of planet is that? Tropical? Okay, well, like beaches tropical? Yeah, but I mean, I thought you knew this. I don't really like the beach. I don't know. I don't like sand. Why not? It's coarse, rough, irritating, and honestly, it just gets everywhere. Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Now, Attack of the Clones, of course, is the direct sequel to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. This movie is set 10 years after The Phantom Menace, and if you didn't already see, I uploaded a review for The Phantom Menace relatively recently. Please go check out that video on my channel. And before I get into any Star Wars review, I have to let you guys know I am absolutely obsessed with Star Wars, and I'm super excited for The Last Jedi coming out here in December. So before the release of that movie, I'm going to try and review all of the other Star Wars films. Now, I mentioned this in my review for The Phantom Menace. That movie, Episode 1, I think still to this day is the most anticipated movie ever. I mean, of all time. No movie will ever beat that movie for being more anticipated. And with that grand amount of anticipation came a ridiculous amount of disappointment. People's expectations were sky high for The Phantom Menace. But then Attack of the Clones comes out 3 years later in 2002. And people went into Attack of the Clones expecting Phantom Menace level of movie rather than expecting original trilogy level of movie. To put that into simpler terms, people didn't have very high expectations for Attack of the Clones. So when this movie really wasn't all that great, it didn't let down a bunch of people, and I think that can be seen with the reviews for this film. On Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a full 10% higher than The Phantom Menace. But it's been 15 years now since the release of this movie, and it's set in on me. I think Attack of the Clones is easily the worst live-action Star Wars movie. But, like in all reviews, I will start off by talking about some of the pros in this film. First off, some of the actors in this movie are fantastic. I mean, you have Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu, who actually does stuff in this movie compared to what he did in his limited amount of screen time in The Phantom Menace. He's great. Frank Oz reprises his role as Yoda, who is now CGI in this movie. We'll talk a little bit about that later. He is fantastic in this film. Legendary actor Christopher Lee is also in this movie, and I mean, his voice is so good it can carry any type of dialogue. He is really a fun presence to see in this movie. And then some particular standouts among the cast members, of course, are Ian McDiarmid as Emperor Palpatine or Chancellor Palpatine in this movie. I love him as this character. And of course, Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is just fabulous in this role. Some of the actors are great. You know what else is great? The special effects, especially for 2002. This movie really holds up well special effects wise. They still look really good 15 years later, and I think this movie was light years ahead of the Hollywood film industry when it comes to special effects. Along with special effects, the ship designs in this movie are some of my favorite in any Star Wars film. I have on my shelf right here the Lego representation of the Republic gunship. This is seriously one of my top 5 favorite Star Wars vehicles. This ship is so cool. The ATTE, a walker in this movie, I love that. Obi-Wan's Jedi Starfighter, another fantastic looking ship. All the ship designs in this movie are awesome. To go along with the special effects trend, a lot of the worlds here are colorful and weird and very unique, and I love that. Some of the action scenes in this movie are also very well done. You also get to see Jedi in this movie, like Mace Windu, like Kit Fisto, Obi-Wan, Anakin, of course. You get to see Jedi, a lot of Jedi, actually fight in this movie, which is really cool. One of the standouts from the original trilogy character-wise, of course, was Bounty Hunter Boba Fett. Now, Boba doesn't really get to do a whole lot in the original trilogy, but you get to see his dad, well, his clone dad in this movie, Jango Fett. And it's really awesome to see Jango Fett. His armor is just like Boba's, but in different colors. Slave 1 is also in this movie, a really great ship design. And a young Boba Fett is in this movie as well, although the child actor playing him does not deliver the best performance. The creature designs in this movie are awesome, especially things like the Nexu. I love that thing, and that thing is a pain to kill in the Bounty Hunter video game. Another great spin-off of this movie. Some really good video games. I love the Bounty Hunter video game, and then the Clone Wars video game that was kind of based off this movie is a fantastic game as well. The sound effects in this movie, the sound design in general, is just amazing. The Acklay creature makes such a weird and fun noise that I love. And then there's the sound effect that the seismic charge makes. This is seriously, I think, one of the greatest sound effects in movie history. I mean, just listen to it. Isn't that awesome? I love the seismic charge. That thing is so cool. That sound effect, it just has such a really awesome feeling. The production design, the sets they build, which there's not too many of them, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but the ones that are there are very cool. And then of course we have, just John Williams' score. I mean, he's John Williams. What more do you expect? Of course his score for this movie is brilliant, and across the stars. It's associated with a rather bad part of the movie that we'll touch on later in this review, but just listen to that theme, forget about the movie, and just listen to the music. It's beautiful. It's incredibly well done. One scene in particular from this movie that really always stood out to me is the death stick scene. It's short, it's simple, but I really love it, and it adds a kind of an element of humor to this movie that works well and adds some to Obi-Wan's character that I like quite a bit. It's also obvious to me while writing the script for Attack of the Clones, George Lucas listened to at least some of the complaints the fans had about The Phantom Menace. Jar Jar Binks, he's not really in Attack of the Clones all that much. However, George Lucas does kind of throw the fans a big middle finger. There's this one scene in particular where Jar Jar walks by and kind of breaks the fourth wall, looks directly at the camera. I always found that scene very distracting and weird, but besides that, there's a significant lack of Jar Jar Binks in this movie, which is great. And finally, for pros about this movie, I mentioned this in my review for The Phantom Menace as well. It's Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I'm obsessed with Star Wars. If I don't have enough toys on my shelf here to show you guys that that's true, I just love this universe. So anything Star Wars, I will eat up, I will consume. It doesn't matter how bad it is, I will still watch it and I will be able to find some enjoyment out of it. But even the fact that this movie is Star Wars, that it's directed and written by George Lucas, cannot save Attack of the Clones from itself. This movie has so many of the flaws that Phantom Menace had, but honestly, they're worse here. The script for this film is abysmal. There's no other way of putting it. It is an absolutely atrociously written script. The dialogue doesn't work at all. It's really horrible. And the dialogue scenes have no action, just like in The Phantom Menace. Every scene of dialogue between characters is usually people standing and talking to each other, sitting down and talking to each other, and then the action they'll have occasionally is two characters walking down a hallway and just talking to each other. A good rule of thumb for Hollywood is when you have dialogue scenes, have the characters be doing something. Eating is an easy example of this. That's really simple. That happens like once in this movie when Anakin and Padme have a super awkward dinner time where he force floats like a pear into Padme's mouth. Oh my gosh, it's so stupid. This movie, like The Phantom Menace, has some more dumb politics because that's what everyone really wanted to see more of in Star Wars is politics and negotiations, yeah! There are some attempts at humor in this movie. C-3PO's head ends up on a battle droid's body. And let's just say, it sucks. I mentioned earlier, Yoda is now all CGI in this film. He's not the only thing that's CGI in this movie, because pretty much everything in this movie is CGI. There is way too much CGI. Now, the special effects here are awesome. They look great, especially for 2002. But there's a point where pretty much you're just watching a couple of live action actors in a giant blue screen set, and it loses something. The thing that's completely CGI in this movie that always really bothered me is the clone troopers. I love the clone troopers. Their name is in the title, the subtitle for this film. But the clone troopers in this movie, they aren't real. None of them are real. They're all CGI. And the original Star Wars movie back in 1977 with a tiny budget had stormtroopers in real armor. This movie, with 4 other Star Wars movies before it, tons and tons of merchandise sales, they were too cheap to actually make real armor for the clone troopers. And they're all CGI, and I hate that! Oh, you remember how they killed off Darth Maul really early? You know, in the Star Wars movies, they just had one movie with Darth Maul, like, okay, that's it. Yeah, this movie does the same thing with Jango Fett. He dies in this movie. You know, you never get to see Jango Fett again because no one wanted to see the cool villain characters appear in more than one Star Wars movie because that would be stupid and lame. Okay, let's talk about Yoda's lightsaber fight. There were cheers for this in the movie theaters back in '02. People loved when Yoda pulled out a lightsaber and, you know, started doing backflips in midair. This little 2-foot tall green goblin looking creature who's like 800 something years old, does backflips and fights with a lightsaber. It's so dumb. It's so stupid. And then there's Hayden Christensen's performance as Anakin Skywalker. Oh, Hayden. Oh, Hayden, oh no. And then George Lucas, his writing for Anakin's character in this film. I don't even know. It's so bad. He mistakes Anakin being a whiny brat for being a troubled person. Obviously, Anakin needs to be a rather dark character on the inside, because eventually he's going to become Darth Vader. But Anakin just acts super whiny and annoying and comes off as just a brat. And it's terrible. I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead. Every single one of them. And not just the men, but the women. And the children too. They're like animals. And I slaughtered them like animals. I hate them! So yeah, Anakin sucks. And so does Padme. And Anakin and Padme, well, they're lovers in this movie. Actually, the entire movie is kind of about them being lovers. The whole plot hinges on their relationship. And it might be the worst on-screen relationship in film history. It just doesn't work. First off, Hayden Christensen, Natalie Portman, no chemistry. No chemistry whatsoever. And honestly, Anakin is just kind of super creepy around Padme the whole time. And I always found their relationship really strange because they first met each other when she was 14, he was 9, and then they see each other 10 years later and fall in love. Like, that's just super weird to me. I already mentioned how bad the dialogue is in this movie, but, well, the love dialogue is
the worst of it.
Yes, I've prepared some vows. Natalie, I truly, deeply love you.
And the fact that this relationship between Anakin and Padme not working is the ultimate downfall of this movie, because this movie is about their love. This is Luke and Leia's parents. We're supposed to care about this relationship. We're supposed to fall in love with them as a couple, and you just don't. It's absolutely horrendous. And in the end, this whole movie just ends up being pretty boring. And as it stands right now, in October of 2017, this is currently the longest of any movie in the Star Wars saga. And it's definitely the hardest to watch. Like I said at the beginning of this review, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, in my opinion, is the worst movie, live action at least, in the entire Star Wars saga. I don't hate this movie. There are some things I love about this movie that I mentioned earlier in this review, but ultimately, even I can't say Attack of the Clones is a good film. I'm gonna give this movie a 4.5 out of 10. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours in the comment section down below. Also, before this video ends, give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and check the description. You can go follow me on Instagram and like my Facebook page. This has been Lee Parham from What Do You Know? Signing off.